Afternoon and welcome to Overtime. Today, the Supreme Court has decided that the EPA does not have the power or, quote, broad authority to shift the nation's energy production away from coal-burning power plants towards cleaner sources, including solar and wind. Quote, capping carbon dioxide emissions at the level that will force a nationwide transition away from the use of coal to generate electricity may be a sensible solution to the crisis of the day, but it is not plausible that Congress gave the EPA the authority to adopt on its own such a regulatory scheme, wrote Chief Justice John Roberts. A decision of such magnitude and consequences rests with Congress itself or an agency acting pursuant to a clear delegation from that representative body. This applies most directly to currently existing plants that the EPA has been regulating. It stipulates that they are no longer allowed to let's see, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure how much it sounds from what I'm seeing here. This is really brand new. It sounds from what I'm seeing that they're not really going to be able to regulate it at all. I think they avoided saying that, but I'm not sure how this decision can be read any other way. The argument is that really, the EPA is making a deliberate attempt to move away from the fossil fuels, and as such, since that was not really their mandate, they're not permitted to do that. We saw a preview of this in the SEC decision, where the SEC was told that Congress had not actually empowered them to make as broad and sweeping regulatory oversight of Wall Street as they had in fact been exercising. And also, it should be noted, they said that that Congress cannot give that much authority to an agency because the power rests solely in Congress, and they can't delegate that power. They are the ones who must be writing the laws and doing at least any of the substantive regulation on Wall Street. The problem is this. One of the reasons that we went over the Dred Scott decision yesterday was because they're making very similar arguments, but they've attacked it from the other side as well in Dred Scott, and despite the fact that that decision was, 170 years ago, they're going to do the same thing here. This is what they're setting up. So what they're going to say is, look, these agencies don't have the power to do this. These are rights that should be legislated, and we, the court, are abandoning, the power that we've been given and giving it back to where it belongs, which is the legislature. The problem is when the legislature exercises that power, they're going to say, whoa, wait a minute now. You're violating the Constitution and taking powers that don't actually belong to you. That's what happened in the Dred Scott decision. So you've lost either way. What the Supreme Court is going to say is this is really something that the legislature should be deciding, and then when the legislature decides it, they're going to say, no, you're not actually permitted to decide that either. That's what you're going to see. We know that one of the things that they said both in the Casey decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, and in the EPA decision, one of the things that they said was, well, these are unique circumstances. These are unique agencies or a unique, the Roe v. Wade. They had said, well, we're not attacking all privacy because Roe v. Wade is actually a very specific and differentiated circumstance as opposed to all of the other potential privacy issues. But so what they also said, this isn't a precedent for any of the other privacy issues. Having said that, they made a complete outline using arguments that have been used before in dissents on those previous issues as to why Roe v. Wade needed to be overturned, and those arguments apply to all of the others. So what they're doing is saying, oh, look, we're not planning on going after all of them. In fact, we're saying you can't because this isn't precedent. But nonetheless, they've given a roadmap for how to take every one of those other ones to the court and have them overturned. We see them. That's exactly what Clarence Thomas said needs to be done, while acknowledging that it's not a precedent. So this has given cover to people on the right who are saying, hey, look, they're talking about leftists talking about the coming for all your rights. No, they've said this isn't a precedent. It doesn't matter. This is deliberately set up as a roadmap for how to undo everything else. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's what Alito has said he's going to do with gay marriage. That's what he tried to do in his dissent. That's what Clarence Thomas said he wants to do with gay marriage, contraception, right of same-sex couples to have relations, the whole 9 yards. So we are seeing this both in terms of agencies in the U.S., the Securities and Exchange Commission, which in my view has been woefully inadequate, has had what teeth it did have pulled. I'll point out that there were some valid criticisms in the decision, but the answer to the fact that it had judicial power, which it either shouldn't have had or should have been checked in some way, isn't to say that they shouldn't have any power whatsoever. And at this point, the EPA looks like it won't be able to enforce any regulations that it as an agency has presumably been empowered to enact. That's, again, what they're going to use. That's actually what they used in the SEC. That's what they're going to use here when they get hammered on it, which is Congress. It's not just that it's Congress's job. Congress can't actually delegate it to another agency. The problem is Congress is in deadlock. Congress doesn't have the ability to do the business it needs to do already. This is piling a huge amount more business to go before Congress. Anybody thinks any of this is going to get done? That's why they create agencies to deal with these issues and to be experts in what needs to be done on their own. Yes, they need to have oversight. Yes, we still need to have checks and balances, but that's the whole point. Justice Elena Kagan, in her dissent, wrote that this decision strips the Environmental Protection Agency of the powers Congress gave it to respond to, quote, the most pressing environmental challenges of our time. It flies in the face of the statute that Congress wrote. The majority says it is simply not plausible that Congress enabled the EPA to regulate power plants' emissions through general shifting, but that is just what Congress did when it broadly authorized the EPA in Section 111 to select, quote, the best systems for emission reduction for power plants. So while, in fact, they have been explicitly instructed by Congress to find the best way to reduce emissions, the Supreme Court has, in its infinite wisdom, decided that the EPA cannot fulfill the duty that it has been given by Congress. President Joe Biden called this decision devastating and said that he is working with the Justice Department to see what he can do. Having said that, the hits keep coming, and as we've said before, I don't think they plan on stopping. In fact, more good news. The Supreme Court Thursday agreed to hear a case that would dramatically change how federal elections are conducted. What they are now addressing is, as we know, because we've been discussing this, it is the legislators of the state that determine how the electors are proportioned, and they're the ones who cover the election. Now, it's written in Article 1 of the Constitution. It says the times, place, and manner of holding elections for senators, representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislation thereof. It turns out that there is a radical theory that is being argued. It comes from a case in North Carolina where the legislature is saying that this grants them exclusive power over elections and that their decisions are not subject to judicial review. I say again, the legislature is claiming that how they run elections is not subject to judicial review. This would mean that complaints of gerrymandering cannot be heard by any court, no state court, no Supreme Court. We've already had issues like this before the U.S. Supreme Court. And again, as it's written in the Constitution, it says that they do hold that sole responsibility. It does not say that there can't be oversight to ensure that people's right to vote is left intact. Gerrymandering is explicitly designed to dilute the votes of your opponents and strengthen the votes of the person who wants to win. We essentially have a situation where candidates are picking their voters instead of voters picking their candidates. If this were to fall in the same way that we've been seeing the other cases fall, now this is going to take a while to decide, but they've at least agreed to look at it. It's very hard to say. They have tepidly supported, or I should say resisted, gerrymandering, but this is going to reduce the power of the Supreme Court somewhat, saying that ultimately even they can't oversee the elections because of the way it's written. I find us in kind of a Mike Pence situation where I absolutely despise the people making the decision, but part of me is sitting there going like, okay, if they really believe in the Constitution, they have to be aware that none of it was intended to have zero oversight. But that's the read. It looks like that's going to be before the Supreme Court. I'm terrified about what they're going to do with that one, because that would essentially mean that each state, it is simply the legislative body in that state without any kind of oversight that gets to decide. And by the way, what if a state decides that they do want to have their Supreme Court supervise the legislature in this regard? According to this, it probably won't do it. So I guess states' rights in that regard aren't quite as important as other states' rights. So that is where we are. We're looking at the EPA having been... I'd like to also actually, just before I quickly go hit the live chat, and then I am going to need to get going, I want to point out that this is a staggering situation for conservatives who have constantly talked about having a smaller government, and you do see that here, but they're also reducing accountability. The Border Patrol decision basically makes it much harder to keep Border Patrol agents in check, and they use the same language. Well, we're not talking about all federal agents. We're only talking about Border Patrol because it's a special issue. It's national security, so this isn't precedent for all the others, except, again, as they have done with regulatory bodies and as they have done with privacy rights, they are making a roadmap for anybody else who wants to do it. So I think it's very easy to, when you look at this, understand that they plan on repeating that for every single federal agent. So at the same time that they're saying, well, we have to be afraid of our governments, people should be afraid of their governments, and the governments should be small and should be serving the people and shouldn't be telling them what to do. But we're going to give the government officials more unchecked power. We're going to give, at what point do we stop? Gestapo? It's amazing that they are stripping away accountability for federal officers, while at the same time, and I have to believe at this point they really want the Wild West. Your rights from in regards to dealing with a federal officer will come not from the courts. They've made that clear, and that needs to be handled by the legislatures. And when the legislature handles it, again, they're going to say, oh, no, sorry, even though we said you're the ones who are supposed to do it, you can't do it either. That's what they're going to do. I guess really it's all going to come down to the Second Amendment. The way that you're going to protect your rights from federal officers is the Second Amendment. I don't see them making another argument at this point, because they're very pro-Second Amendment, but they're against the state having any kind of supervisory power over the officers. If you're going to do it, at least they say it should be done through Congress, but as soon as Congress does it, they're going to shoot it down, and we all know Congress isn't going to be able to get to it anyway. Oh, dear Lord. All right, so it's just going to be one of those years, I think. I'm going to go check out the live chat, and then we're going to get going. But for those of you just joining us, the EPA has, as Andrew has thoughts, and I'd very much like to hear those. I'm going to see if we can do a show tonight. It's going to be iffy. I would like to discuss these things further. And I think Andrew is a very good person to do that with. He certainly keeps some of my liberal passions in check, which is probably a good idea. But, he's fair, and you guys know who he is. He's friggin' co-host on In Time. So, of course, you're going to... But tell SCOTUS to stop long enough to let me mow the lawn. Yeah, That would be nice, right, to have a bit of a breather. So for those of you just joining us, the EPA has been gutted in roughly the same way that the SEC was. They reassured us, the Supreme Court, that when they gutted the SEC, hey, don't worry, this isn't precedent. This is just the SEC is unique for these reasons. It doesn't apply to all agencies. And oh, hey, look, there's the EPA. Let's have a talk about them because it turns out the SEC isn't quite as unique as it sounds. Same with Roe v. Wade. Oh, the Roe decision was unique. Abortion is unique. We're not going to tackle, is that same-sex marriage? Let's have a conversation. Also, of course, federal officials. Oh, the Border Patrol is unique. We're not going to, say that you can't sue any federal officer. Just with the Border Patrol, we have to make it a lot harder because it's national security. And is that the FBI? Let's talk about the FBI. So it's really quite shocking. It's unfortunately, we talked about this pattern when we first saw the original Alito leak. It's where it's headed. So I think we're going to have a lot more decisions that are going to be coming out. We anticipated this. We told you guys this, and none of it is very good right now. With any luck, we'll be able to have an in time and have a pretty good discussion with this. I would very much like to hear Zandring's point of view. As much of a pain in the ass as he's been during some of these hearings when he's like, well, the evidence is kind of hearsay and this and that. He's kind of what keeps us in check from letting our own, passions run away with us. And, I think he's been, so we'll do that. But at any rate, we do have for tomorrow, Commander McMillan, 9:30. We are going to be discussing the war in Ukraine and I know he's also got some opinions on this, so maybe we'll save a little time at the end and see what he's got to say about the dramatic changes. This is unprecedented. How much is now being thrown on the table by any one Supreme Court? It's all right. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully tonight if we can find a way to squeeze it in. If not, we will see you all tomorrow. Good night.